Hello, everybody, and welcome to the science of neurology. Now, even though people are more focused with something else, I think you heard of it, it's called the coronavirus, there are some things we need to talk about for this country, namely the presidential elections. Well, yes, it's not currently on people's minds, but it's good to know who the candidates are, so you have information before you put your vote in. Whenever Super Tuesday is for your state, and then when the election happens in November. Now, there are 3 candidates for president after there being 20 of them a few months ago, a few weeks ago. And those 3 are Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and current President Donald Trump. And I'm going to talk about all of them to see, who do you think is the better one? Well, let's start off with Joe Biden, who has a lot of skeletons in his closet. I'm going to tell you that right now. Let's begin. Alright, so Joe Biden may be known for 2 things. The first is being the vice president of the U.S., and the second was being a sexual harasser, someone who has been claimed to sexually harass women. 8 women allege that Joe Biden touched them inappropriately or violated their space. He said made them uncomfortable. Okay, well, here we go. Alright, so Joe Biden, who may have been called the boomer of this if Bernie Sanders wasn't running, did have a lot of experience before being the vice president. He was a defense attorney from 1968 to 1970, where he defended criminals in Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware, actually, not far from where I live, just a couple hours away, I think. Then he became the senator of Delaware in 1973. He represented Delaware in the early 70s. Now, he did run for president in 1988, like he is doing now, but he dropped out because he was being accused of being a plagiarist by a bunch of newspaper writers, which he has said were false but were proven true. So we have a sexual harasser and an accused plagiarizer if you ask the right person. America is doomed. Anyway, he still worked in the whole government stuff, and he introduced the Violence Against Women Act. Isn't it ironic, don't you think? Which was signed by President Clinton. If you don't know what that is, basically, you get shot. If you are accused of harassing or assaulting a woman, you get a huge fine for it, or you get jail time for it. Maybe both. So, that's a good thing, but, that's kind of ironic. Also, he did what a bunch of people were looking about. He wanted to do something that people were conflicting about a lot around 2002 and 2003, sending troops to Iraq, which would lead to the problems that we have today, things like the Iraq War and the World War III memes. America is great, isn't it? Well, you voted for sending troops in Iraq in 2002, and, it happened. It happened, and Iraq has been saying death to America for a while now. Anyway, he ran for president again in 2008, but withdrawed, and it was never released why he withdrawed in 2008, but instead became the vice president for Barack Obama, and he was sworn in around early 2008, and he was vice president again in 2012, where he was sworn in again. He was given the Medal of Honor by President Obama, and then he did some more heinous stuff, like, I don't know, wrongly charging ex-Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas for sexual harassment that he did not commit. He was wrongly accused, and no, he wasn't found guilty, but he almost was, and one of the people who were fighting for it was Joe Biden. Yeah, so of his sexual harassment, well, I mean, he was found guilty for he was found guilty for all but 2 of them. That's right. 6 times he's been found guilty, and he has had to pay a large sum of money, which has not been publicly released. That has been publicly released. So, I mean, what a presidential candidate we have, and he is in the lead just because he's the former vice president. Of course, so it's not as bad as stuff like Trump building a wall, which we will get to, and Clinton really having a love for nuclear war, which we won't get to because Clinton isn't running this time. I think she does it every 8 years. I don't know. But the fact is that, of course, he wasn't as, like, it doesn't have as many problems as, say, Clinton or Trump or, hey, even Sanders has stuff that happened, which I will talk about in a future podcast. I mean, it's just a shame that someone who's looked up to has done some, like, incredibly hypocritical stuff and is trying to reverse the Violence Against Women Act, which he introduced because he was trying to get off the hook for doing the stuff that he has done. He probably sexually harassed another woman. Maybe. More so, I mean, when I vote for him, well, I mean, well, in any other election, no. I mean, there have been better candidates like 2016 Bernie Sanders or President Obama. They were good candidates who would easily beat Joe Biden. But nowadays, I mean, with the now kind of bad Bernie Sanders and Trump and formerly Mike Bloomberg, someone who had a law when he was mayor of New York where police could just easily, just without consequence, just search a man on the street with no consequence whatsoever. He was one of the people who was all for that. I mean, Biden, he's okay, alright? He's probably the main choice, and knowing the candidates now, maybe he would be my vote if I was forced to vote. So, I mean, if you like him, that's fine. You go for it. But he's just not my personal favorite, seeing the information that I have. But yeah, that's just my opinion. You can tell me what you think of him. And Instagram me at Science of Neurology. You can talk to me on Instagram at Science of Neurology. And of course, shout outs to at Uncle_Wesley and at FCF.Immortal. Shout outs to them. And thank you. And My next podcast will be in a couple days, where I will do show some information on everyone's favorite Bernie Sanders. People who were boomers, call them boomers. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, thank you and goodbye.